All right, Sasha, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you on here, and it's been a privilege to know you. You're one of my first homeschool friends in Heber, and I was so impressed with what you've been doing for years. You have wonderful kids, and I'm so excited to have you on to talk about personal revelation and how you use it and how you implement it in your homeschool. So my favorite first question is like, what brought you to this place? Like, why do you homeschool?
Okay, so there's a lot of reasons, and it could take the whole time to explain. So I'm going to just try to sum up.
Okay.
Um, but I think it was a couple main things. So one is I'm one of those moms that every summer when my kids had to go to school, because my older kids did go to school, I would literally cry. I would be so sad. And it kind of triggers me when I hear people be like, "Oh, summer's almost ending and the moms are going to be so excited because their kids are gone." And I'm like, "What? No, we're not. Not all moms are like that. Like some of us really want to be with our kids a lot. And so that was one thing is I just hated when summer ended and I had to surrender my children
Like
to
an
the
offering.
state. Yeah.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
um, and so that was one reason, but I don't think at that time, it's been years ago, and I don't think I would have just brought them home for that because I didn't think that was a good enough reason at the time, even
Mhm.
though now I know that it was. I know that was like, the spirit telling me to be with your children, spend more time
Mhm.
with your children. But another reason was as my children started going through the school system, some things started happening that I didn't love and
Mhm.
that I didn't agree with. And there was a lot of great things. We had a
Mhm.
lot of amazing teachers, and there are so many people out there that dedicate their lives to teaching children, and I'm thankful for that. But we had some, like one time, one of my daughters came home from school and she said, "Mom, they pulled me out of class right in the middle of class and they took me to resource." And I was like, "Wait, what? Why did they take you to resource? What are you talking about?" And they had pulled her out of class and taken her to math resource and never even told me that she had a problem with math. I had no idea. And I volunteered every single week in the school the whole time my kids were in the public school system. And so there was plenty of time for them to tell me, or a note home or anything. And so I went in and talked to the teacher, and she was like, "Oh, yeah, well, she's not doing that great in math." And I was like, "Why didn't you tell me?
Mhm.
I can help her. She's only in fourth grade. I can do fourth grade math." And so I said, "Don't ever pull my child out again unless you tell me first. I get to make those decisions." And so I took my daughter home and was like, "I'll help you. We can do this." And so I taught her at home, and she turned out to be an amazing mathematician, like really good with math, and has done awesome ever since then. But one of the things that bothered me also in that story is I went back to the teacher and I said, "Look, she understands it. Like, this is how I taught her. If you can just kind of reinforce this." And she said, "Oh, I can't teach that way anymore because ever since Common Core, like,
Mhm.
I've had to sign a document that I will teach this way." And she's like, "It changes actually every couple of years. We have to sign something new that says we'll teach a certain way." And so that was my first, you know, run in with this one size fits all education.
Mhm.
If it's easier for a kid to just borrow, instead of regroup, teach them to borrow.
Mhm.
But it was just like, nope, it has to be done this way. And so that kind of bothered me. And then as my kids got older, um, I felt like I was calling the school all the
Mhm.
time. I was calling the teachers, I was emailing, I was calling the principals. Just things were being taught that I don't agree with morally.
Mhm.
And they all knew me by, first name basis when I'd call the school. And I just started thinking, there's got to be a different way. Like, I can't go through my whole life being mad about what my children are learning. I need to change it. And so that's when I just really started praying about homeschooling and felt like it was right
Wow,
for
that's
me.
cool.
And like I said before, we have lots of teachers that we love, especially elementary, age-ish, but
Mhm.
lots of teachers that we loved, and counselors and different people along the way that were great. So just for my family, just turned out to be a better fit to homeschool. But
Well, something I've never asked you, actually, I'm curious, was it like a clean break? Was like, we're going home, or was it kind of like slowly ease out, or how did you do that? Or
So I still remember the day that I drove to the school district building and went in and signed my paper saying, I'm pulling my kids out. And it was super scary. My oldest daughter, I let her stay in school because she was like, Mom, like she was just going into ninth grade.
Mm,
And she was like, Mom, you like, what? You can't pull me out now. Although she had a good high school experience, but she has said many times, like, I wish I'd have just let you pull me out. Because we've done so many fun things
interesting.
as a homeschool and with a homeschool group, but where her mind was in ninth grade, and that's okay. So
Mhm.
I let her stay, but the other three I pulled out. And I remember being so scared. It's kind of like when you have a baby. You're like,
Mhm.
they're letting me take this baby home from the hospital. I don't know what I'm gonna do with this thing, I don't know how to feed it. I don't know how to do anything. It was kind of like that. Like I was scared, but I also just felt so good. And so
That's
like,
great.
I'm going to be guided. We're going to be okay. So
Wow, good for
yeah.
you. I'm actually curious because you have like different age kids. I kind of asked this to Julie last week, like, and I feel like you guys did hybrid later on a little bit, right? Kind of like a
Mhm.
little bit of both. I'm just personally curious, like, how did you like that? How did they like that? Was that from them or from you guys, or did that just kind of happen organically? Or
So, what happened was in the beginning, you're kind of navigating it and you don't really understand like, how am I going to get my kid to college?
Mhm, right? Yeah.
Like they need a high school diploma
Yeah.
or they need to pass the ACT or like, what am I going to do?
Mhm,
And so at first, I thought they have to go to high school
mhm,
because that's just how they're going to get to college. But then I learned that that's just not true.
mhm,
Um, you don't have to go to high school to get to college. In fact,
mhm,
nowadays, colleges love homeschoolers. And my kids did college classes during their high school years. And so they
mhm,
just like went in as a transfer student. And so, and now even BYU says if you have a certain amount of credits, you don't even have to take the ACT because they can see if you can do all these college credits,
mhm,
obviously you can do the college work you've already done,
mhm.
a whole year. And so, it's just a lot easier now to get into college without, you know, it's just easy to do because not easy. I mean, they're putting in the work, but
Yeah.
you don't have to go to high school. And so, but what happened is since my older kids had gone to some school,
Mhm,
for sure, it's like every year at the beginning of school, they would be like, well, I kind of want to take a couple classes.
mhm,
And so they would take a couple classes. I would say, that's fine, go for a couple classes. And
mhm,
then after like 2 weeks in, and this is like young grades, like
mhm,
fifth, sixth, seventh, they'd be like, I heard the F word like 7 times today.
mhm,
I don't really like being there, and
mhm,
it's like when you're not there all the time,
mhm.
you can tell that it feels different.
I love that.
And so they would pull themselves out. They would start the year, go for like 2 or 3 weeks, and then be like, yeah, I don't want to go anymore. And so they would just stop going. And it wasn't their core classes because we were doing core at home, it
Mhm,
was just kind of like fun classes. Um, and then, yeah, in college or high school age, they just did college classes. And you can do
mhm,
them at the high school or you can do them just straight online.
mhm,
There's different ways, just kind of whatever fits. And same thing, they would start out at the high school. And then about a couple months in, they'd be like, I'm just going to watch it online at home,
I
so
bet inside you're like, yes.
yeah, well,
Or
it honestly for me was just like, they're they're choosing this and
that's cool.
they can feel, I guess. They can well and see. There's a lot going on in the high schools, but they can feel and see a difference,
Mhm,
and it offends their spirit and they
mhm,
just are like, it's overrated. I don't want to be there anymore, and they still have friends and they would good friends and they would go out with their friends when they wanted to and stuff, but they just didn't have the desire to be there even a couple hours a day.
yeah. Wow, thank you for sharing all that. That was really great. Um, okay, here's one I always am interested in. How do you keep homeschool fun, engaging, besides hang out with us at the homeschool co-op,
I know.
right?
The co-op is so fun.
How do you keep it positive and fun?
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's like a loaded question for me because so in the beginning of the year, I let my kids choose what they want to learn.
Mhm.
You know, I let them have a lot of say in it. What do you want to do for science? And what history should we do? Should we do
Mhm.
American history, or should we do, you know, World War I, or should we do, like, what should we do? And so they have a lot of ownership in that. And I feel like sometimes kids have to do things that are hard.
Mhm.
And so, and I want my kids to be educated. I want them to know how to write a paper. You know, I feel like you are going to have to communicate as an adult through email all the time. You're going to have to
Mhm.
communicate. There's just so many reasons why you're going to need to be able to write. If you want to write a senator, if you're doing church service, like we need to know how to organize our thoughts onto
Mhm.
paper and write a well-written paper, you know? And so, and there's a lot of different things that I just feel like they need to know how to do this, and they need to know how to do this. And so sometimes they're like, no, I don't want to do that. And I'm like, that's too bad, because I'm the mom. And so, like, the other day, I asked my son to write me a report. I said, you could pick any sea creature you want, because that's what he was studying in science this year. Any sea creature you want, and I want you to write me a report. And he did not want to do it. But when I came back an hour later, it was beautiful. He had drawn
Ooh.
around all the sides, the sea creatures. So it's like has this border, and it
Mhm.
was such a good paper. I put it on the fridge, and you know, it's good to do hard things. And so I think there's times when it's just like light and fun,
Mhm.
and that's their ownership in picking what they want to learn. Or like my son, he finished science before Christmas because he just went through it so fast. And so I said, well, what other science do you want to do for next semester?
Mhm.
I thought it would take him the whole year. He's like, I don't really want to do science. I really want to read all of these books. And I'm like, okay, then that's what we'll put in for your science time, even though it's not science, it's a set of history books, you know. So he has ownership in that. So
Mhm.
that's where I think it's the fun. And sometimes it's true, we go skiing, or we go on field trips, we try to do a lot of things. And then sometimes I also just say, and we have to do this because
Mhm.
there's reasons why you have to know how to turn in a paper on time, you know, that you'll have deadlines your whole entire life. You have to know how to hit a deadline. You have to know how to write a paper. You have to know how to be responsible, you know.
Absolutely.
So there's kind of
Be a
both.
good missionary.
Yeah.
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 It's stayed with me forever. A mission president said, John Bytheway's mission president said, the best missionaries were farmers, athletes, or musicians.
Yeah.
So I feel like you have a little bit of all of that in your family with your kids. So
Yeah. Farmers, yes. Athletes,
somewhat, yeah,
musicians.
yeah, 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 musicians for sure.
I don't know,
Yeah.
but yeah. Well, and you know, I think I watched a podcast that you did last week
Hmm.
with Julie, and her family is so talented. They just, like she said, we've never had one music lesson, and they're all amazing. But we've kind of taken the motto, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard, because we have no talent. In the family, we don't, but we just have learned to work hard, you know. And Georgia, my daughter that plays the violin so well,
Hmm.
that was her motto. She was like, I can do this, I can do this. And she just kept telling herself, I'm going to work hard,
Wow.
you know. So that's what we do. Our family is a family that works hard.
Discipline is a skill. I love that. Um, so I feel like we kind of addressed what's going really well in your homeschool, unless you want to point anything else out.
No, you
No?
could.
Okay. What about other family members? How supportive is your husband, or I don't know, extended family members? I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. So my husband from day one
Hmm.
has been super supportive.
That's nice.
He's always just been like very trusting in what I do. And now if I were to say, oh, I just really want to put the kids back in school, like I've been doing this for so long, he would be like, no, please don't. No, you know, because he just really values it. And he's
That's so
very
cool.
vocally supportive. You know, he always tells
Mhm.
me that what I'm doing is so amazing, and
Oh, that's
he
nice.
loves how like our kids turn out, and he feels like it's because we homeschool. And you know, he's very supportive. But he's not like a hands-on homeschooler, because
Mhm.
he homeschooled dad, because he leaves at 6 in the morning and gets
Mhm.
home at 6:30 at night every day. So we're done homeschooling by 6:30 at night.
I hope so.
And we're not starting before 6 in the morning. So yeah, so he doesn't have a huge role in that way, but he's very supportive. And then
That's so cool. I
my
love it.
dad was very supportive.
Oh,
He's passed
nice.
away, but because I'm the first person on either side of my family to homeschool, and he would always say things like, I just think it's so great that
Oh,
since you weren't happy, that you just took matters into your own hands. And, he was always very supportive, and my mom was supportive. So
I think that's really huge to have that. I don't know if I could do it without
yeah,
family support,
yeah,
because then you're gonna doubt yourself sometimes.
yeah,
But that's cool.
yeah.
Okay, I'd love to hear. I've learned so much these last podcasts about how to kind of level up my come follow me. So what do you do in your come follow me that really works for you guys? Like, what do you recommend?
Okay, I'm going to help you to level down
Whatever.
because I feel like when Come Follow Me started, nothing changed for us because we've read I've read the scriptures to my children since like they were born. And I feel like that's what Come Follow Me was trying to get parents to do, which in my opinion is another shout out for homeschool, because the church was like, we're going to go down to 2 hours because it's your job to teach your children. It's not our job, and the church has always said, like, we're here to support the family. But sometimes we think that, no, the church is supposed to do everything, and so, we were already reading our scriptures. I guess the only thing that changed is we basically read the Book of Mormon every year. And now we're reading, and I, on my own, I would read with the Sunday school. So I would read Old Testament and New Testament, but with my kids, I just read Book of Mormon every year. So that has changed, where we follow the curriculum and we're reading as a family the Old Testament and as a family the New Testament. But basically we just read it. We just read it every night and we talk about the stories. And I think the one thing that I do is I study every morning what I'm going to read with them at night. That's my personal scripture study in the morning, so that the Spirit can like help me kind of pick out before we're all together, like, oh, this is good to talk about, and this would be helpful for this person. And so I kind of have a plan in my mind, and I make sure I understand the doctrine and just whatever is being taught. And then we go through but we just read. Read and talk about it. And so they get the stories, and and then I do have my children. I've always had my children, one of their subjects is Book of Mormon. And so they will read the book, and it's the very first subject of the morning every day. And other things fall into different places, in different times of the day, but Book of Mormon is always just first. And then so they're getting used to reading on their own, because I tell them, when you read as a family, like, I'll be teaching you the doctrine and we'll be having a discussion. But when you read alone, that's when the Spirit can talk to you. So,
like it does for you in the morning.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So
that did not level down.
It
That was
did.
good.
No, like, you don't have to do any, no extracurricular stuff here.
No, I love that because, and I'm going to implement that. Now I'm going to copy you because I feel like we do talk about it a lot every day, but I don't have them do it alone enough, because I feel like they'll get distracted. But I feel like at least my oldest is getting old enough to not.
Well, and the youngers can do the little books.
That's true.
Even like the little board books, like just so that they have their own personal time with God. And they might not even know, but they'll read the stories. All kids can read, or they can look at the pictures, but just personal time with God. So they're learning every day. I need my personal time to just tap in to God.
I love that. Oh, beautiful. Okay, so the heart of my podcast, I would love to, if you would share, especially like any personal experiences in implementing personal relation in your homeschool, the Holy Ghost giving you promptings about what you've done in homeschool. Does that question make sense?
Yeah. Okay. So the one thing I was going to say is just
Mhm.
that reading my scriptures every morning, I think, just kind of gives me clarity and helps me know. And I do feel like I was prompted to have them read on their own. Because, I used to be like, read as a family, and I'd be like, okay, read your scriptures when I'd put them to bed, read your scriptures. But it's just easier it's just first thing in the morning. So anyway, but then another thing is, I remember at the very beginning of homeschooling, I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was like, how am I going to have the money to do all this? Because I didn't know that there's actually lots of different associations or things that you can join that will,
Vouchers kind of.
yeah, vouchers that you can get all this tax money. And so finding that out's a game changer
Yeah.
because there's so much good curriculum out there that you can buy with these vouchers. But the first year I was just like, I'm just going to download things and print off things. And the Spirit told me very clearly, buy books and make a library and have a physical copy. And so I did. I made a big library in my house, and now everything's double stacked. There's like a stack and a second front. And now that I've got to start putting them other places, but I have them all categorized in like history, and it starts from the beginning of the world and then it goes through. And so I'll be able to be like, oh, here's all my World War II, here's all my World War I, here's all my, like the Dark Ages. And I just have everything put together. And I just love having a library. I loved and the classics and just different things. And like the other day, my daughter Berkeley said, Mom, I really want to start doing something with Audrey, her daughter. I don't know what. And I said, well, let's go see what I did with Bowden. And I have all, these little curriculum packs and books and just different things. And so I've loved having a library. I feel like the Spirit taught me that. And then I think one time, I remember this specifically, but my son was having a really hard time learning how to read. And my daughters picked it up. I think girls and boys are just different, but of course, everybody's just different. And I feel like my daughters picked it up more easily. And he was just having such a hard time. And finally, I remember the Spirit just said to me, just read this year. Just don't do anything else. Just read. And so we didn't do anything else. We just worked on reading the whole year, because what would happen is when I had too much, and he was like 7, but when I had too much for him to do, we just would get frustrated. And so I just had him read. I mean, then I would read science to him. I would read other things to him or do other things, but his only job that year was to learn how to read. And now I can't even keep him in book. I mean, he just goes through books like crazy. It's hard to find books that are appropriate for his level because he has such a high reading level. You know what I mean? I have to be like, oh, well, that might be too old for you or whatever. So, but the Spirit taught me that year, like, just scale it back. Don't worry about doing all these other things. Just help him learn to read. So that was one. And I really do think if we're prayerful every day, that I think we have little things all the time.
I agree.
That we feel and hear and do, that's just different for each child. And yeah.
That's cool. I love those stories. Yeah, and I love your library. I didn't know it's kind of like organized by like beginning till now.
Yep.
Oh,
and then I have
yeah.
and all my sciences in a place and everything. But yeah, so everything's historically, even if they're like just historical fiction or whatever, I've got them all in so that I can say, oh, if my kids say in fact, my daughter did say, she came home off her mission and she's like, I need to learn more about like the founding of America, and she went through the public system too. And I always say, oh, I wish you could have come to my history class, because I love history so much. But I'm like, oh, good, here's a whole section for you.
Wow.
And so she's, going through and starting to learn about that. That's one thing I think homeschool just really trumps public school is you can teach history so good, and history is just taught a little bit different in public school. It's more like memorizing dates, and things people are just going to memorize for the test and forget. And then in homeschool, you can do it all through literature. It's all through stories. And so as they're reading the stories, they're like learning history, and it's fun and engaging.
I love that. Oh, good. All good points. Okay. I would love to know like where you see yourself and your kids. I don't think the word end game is the right thing, but like, how do you see the future for them and for yourself? I'm actually curious. My sister-in-law, she's been homeschooling for years, and her son is a senior, and this is her last kid to homeschool. And she's like, I don't know who I am anymore.
Yeah.
Like once they're gone, like, how do you see them? I guess 2-part question. Like, where do you see them, and where do you see yourself, like, in let's say 10 years with homeschooling?
Well, so yeah, my youngest will graduate, he'll be 18 or whatever in 6 years. So I've got 5 or 6 more years that I'll be with him. And then, so my dream,
Yeah, tell me all your dreams.
okay, my
Tell
dream
the world your dreams.
is that somehow my kids will get to live by me
Yeah,
and
like
I
that
can
dream.
help them in their homeschool. And they're always, all of them want to homeschool. And
That's a win.
I know they all want to, and they always say, if we could live by each other, then we can have a cousin co-op, and they're always like, Georgia can teach music and mom can teach history
Yeah.
and Berkeley can teach baking. And, they all have their things and
Yeah.
Cicely could teach a ton of things. So, that would be my dream, is to help my kids with like a cousin co-op or whatever, but who knows if that will happen. It's hard to know where all your kids are going to turn out. But even still, just like I did the other day, I gave a whole bunch of books to Berkeley and she took them home. And I said, okay, when I come visit you, Audrey, I want to see what you've done, and just to be a part of it. But yeah.
That's great. That's a really great goal. I love that. What about for you? Oh, this is part of it, right?
Well, yeah, for me, I don't know.
Okay.
I'm sure when I get there, maybe I'll ride my horse again. Maybe I'll have time to do that. I feel like, I do feel like when you homeschool, a lot of your other hobbies that aren't as important definitely fall by the wayside. I mean, they have for me, because I take my homeschooling really, like, it's really important to me, and so I'm not like super lackadaisical about it, so a lot of things have definitely fallen out of my life that sometimes I'm sad about, but
you've learned so much, right?
Yeah. I mean, I would never trade it. And I feel like those things obviously weren't fulfilling me, or I would still be doing them.
That's true.
Yeah. And so it's kind of just put everything into its proper place. And I feel like that's one of the reasons too why I started to homeschool, is that in the proclamation to the world on the family, it says that the mother is responsible for the nurture of her children. And I used to be like, so I'm just supposed to like feed my kids and, give them hugs and like, is that it? And when I was going through that whole thing about deciding if I was going to homeschool, that phrase kept coming to my mind. And so finally I looked up, what does it mean to nurture?
Oh, good question.
What is Heavenly Father saying when he told the prophet to write that? And it actually means 3 things. So it means to give nourishment. So yeah, I'm supposed to feed my kids and do their laundry when they're young and give them hugs, that's part of it. But then the other 2 are to teach and to like train up, to develop. It was to develop. And so then I was like, oh, so what God is saying is that I'm in charge of teaching my children, and I'm in charge of developing them, helping them to develop, to become the best person that they can be. And then that's a whole different story of just like, well, I'm supposed to give you hugs until you're 5. And then like you go to school for the rest of your life and I never see you, And now Heavenly Father's like, you're in charge of teaching them. And so that was huge. And so that has been really fulfilling to me, even though it's like, it's hard work, but it's very, very fulfilling. Just feeling like when my kids do finally leave the house, that I spent every minute I could with them and that I gave them my all, and it's been fulfilling. It's been good.
That's cool. I love how you look up like definitions of word, because that's such a full-bodied word.
Yeah.
That they chose, which I'm sure they chose very carefully to put that in there.
Yeah.
Nurture. Wow.
Especially because it says the dad's supposed to provide and he's supposed to preside and he's supposed to protect and the mom's supposed to nurture. And I was like, how come we got one thing? Joking. But I just wanted to know what it really meant. And that means something totally different than what I thought, because I thought it just meant like, read them bedtime stories and give them some hugs. And it kind of felt like fluffy to me. Like, oh, I'm just, the dad does everything and I'm just the fluff. And then now I'm like, oh, actually, God wants me to do a lot. He wants me to teach them and help them develop. And there's a ton that he wants me to do. So that was good for me to learn.
That's so cool. Well, this is not a question on here, but I just felt really prompted to see if you would like take a minute to share about having your kids go to the temple regularly. And you can speak to that for a minute if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
I love your philosophy on that.
Yeah. Well, So I started going years ago regularly because I needed it in my life. And it definitely brought a lot of light, to my life. And it just became kind of part of me, just something that I just needed every week. And so when my first daughter, when she became 12, when she turned 12, I just took her with me because I was like, how I can't go down. It's, 45 minutes away. And I was like, oh, I can't go down twice. And it's just a lot of time away from the family when you have a bunch of little kids. And so I just started taking her with me, and the initiatory time and the baptism time matched up pretty good. And um, anyway, then all of the kids have just done the same. We just, when the next daughter came up and the next daughter came up, we just all went together.
That's so cool.
And it was so fun. And now I'm going with Bowden, and he takes friends when we can and stuff. But I definitely noticed when my kids were in high school, they just could see clearly. And that is a blessing of the temple. Like, we're blessed with discernment. We are blessed to see between truth and error and between right and wrong. Like, it's a blessing. And even though they're doing baptisms and they're not doing the other things, I know that those same spiritual gifts apply. And, here's something else I learned. But when my oldest kids were going through high school, they wanted to be home a lot, like I told you. And I would say, go out with friends. You need to go out with your friends. Like, everyone's doing something, I'm sure. And they'd be like, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. And after a while, the Spirit said to me, just leave her alone. Like, let your kids stay home if they want to.
Nice.
And they were discerning. They were like, I don't really want to go out. Like, I don't really want to go do that. And they just made good choices, and where I hear a lot of times parents like, oh, teenagers. I'm like, ooh, teenagers, they're so fun and they're so great and amazing. And I truly believe it's from the temple. Like, they just have the spirit of discernment, and I just need to step out of the way and let them listen to God.
I love that. I thank you for sharing that. And I agree. I think teenagers get kind of a bad rap,
Yeah.
and it's not quite fair for them. And
Yeah.
I think they are doing the best they can, especially in this crazy world.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, my last question. What is a piece of advice you would share with homeschool moms?
Okay. So are we talking, I thought about this, and are we
Okay.
talking about people wanting to become homeschoolers or people who are already homeschooling?
Everybody's kind of done a different thing. So you could do
Okay.
one of each. I'll allow that.
Okay. Not that I have like that much advice. But one thing is, people always say to me, oh, I wish I could homeschool, but I'm not smart enough. And I'm like, well, neither am I, neither is anybody. No, neither is any teacher. That's just because they went to school to learn how to teach doesn't mean they're smart enough to teach your kid everything that they need to know. Nobody's going to teach your kid everything they need to know. And there's just so much good curriculum. And that's like, I'm just like, just find the curriculum that you love. And that's what's so fun every year, is just picking and going through, and you find certain ones that you love and your kids love. And then they get to, like I said, so don't be scared of that, that there's just tons of help out there. And then another thing I thought is, I remember at the beginning always asking my kids' friends when I would see them, what are you learning in math? What are you learning in English? Like, what, and trying to be like, I better make sure that my kids are keeping up with the public schoolers. And what I learned is, you do want your kids to stay on grade level in math and reading. But nothing else matters, because they were learning a different history a different year. So what? So if they're learning American history this year and we're learning World War history, big deal, right? But I also learned that, like I said before, a lot of things I don't want my kids learning anyway. That, at some of the things, it's just, don't worry about it. As long as your kids do need to know how to do math. Every adult in the world needs to know how to do basic math. And every adult knows how to read. And if you can read, you can do science, you can do history, you can do everything, because you're reading about it, so just don't compare, and just let that fall off your shoulders. That's something I had to learn. Let's see, what else did I find vouchers. so that you have tons of
Yeah.
money to buy all this cool curriculum. That's a game
Great.
changer. And then I do think it's fun. Not all co-ops or commonwealths are created equal, but I do think it's fun to have some sort of mom kid group where, like I'm not fantastic in science.
Mhm.
We can read about it and learn about it, but I'm not the mom that's going to be like, now let's order some, lizards to dissect.
Mhm.
Like I don't want to do that.
Mhm.
I just don't think about it. But there is a mom in our co-op that does want to do that.
Thank goodness for her.
I know. And so the kids love going to
Yeah.
her class and dissecting. And that's why I always call it a commonwealth, just because I can take your wealth and
Mhm.
the wealth from everybody else and put it together for the common good of all of our kids. And
Mm.
so I have loved having some kind of group, and it can be loosely, made, or it can be rigid or whatever, but just having some friends that you guys can work together and help each
Mhm.
other's kids, and they help you, and it's just fun.
I think community is so important in
Yeah.
homeschooling. Yeah, I feel like we're really blessed in this valley to have a good community.
Yeah,
So
me too.
that's so cool. I love that. I had like 5 different thoughts on what you were saying, but now they're all gone. But don't compare. I agree with that.
Yeah, it's the worst.
So yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for being
Yeah,
my podcast.
thank
It was
you.
really beautiful, and I especially felt the Holy Ghost when you talked about the temple. There's something so special about that. So thanks, Sasha. You're the best.
Thank you.